For the How to Read Literature Like a Professor project, I had Chapter 8, Hansel D. and Greteldom. The overview of this chapter, the thesis, is that the average American is unacquainted with colloquial literature. Therefore, many authors have introduced alluding to children's books and fairy tales to establish parallelism, allegories, and plot structure that the reader will be more conversant with. Now, in the beginning of the chapter, Foster often references something called the literary canon. The literary canon is essentially a list of books and texts that are influential during certain periods in history. Examples of books from the literary canon include To Kill a Mockingbird, Pride and Prejudice, The Great Gatsby, and plays like Romeo and Juliet. Authors in the past have tried to use allusions from the literary canon. However, nowadays, most people would not understand the references. As a result, authors have now resorted to alluding to children's literature and fairy tales. Authors will include small details in a fairy tale in order to build up parallels, analogies, and plot structures that most readers would be familiar with. And this chapter gets its name, Hansel D. and Greteldom, because a lot of people would understand the reference to Hansel and Gretel because it has a very enduring appeal. Now, authors use allusions from children's books to further appeal to their audience, and some examples that Foster uses include Cat in the Hat, Alice in the Wonderland, Goodnight Moon, and Sleeping Beauty. My examples are Winnie the Pooh, Harry Potter, Charlotte's Web, and Where the Wild Things Are. I use these examples because they are commonly referenced through other texts in literature. Foster claims that the average American would not understand references from famous writers such as Shakespeare and Homer. Some examples from culture and TV shows: The Office. Michael Scott, who is the boss, was telling one of his usual stories to his office employees. He was talking about an experience in prison, and he mentioned Dementors, which are dark creatures from Harry Potter that feast on human happiness and cause depression. And the scriptwriters most likely included this analogy so that the audience could better understand and compare Dementors to what prison was like, using a common ground which everyone would know. Similar in Family Guy, Stewie, the youngest in the family, is explaining why nothing works out for Brian the dog. Stewie says to Brian that you have a very negative attitude like Eeyore. By making the analogy to the character from Winnie the Pooh, the audience is able to compare Eeyore's attitude to Brian's attitude to better understand what Brian's attitude is. And using a cartoon that everyone knows, their audience is able to develop a better understanding. And that is the end of my presentation for Chapter 8 of How to Read Literature Like a Professor.